Good morning, everybody. My name is André Keet, and of course, like Prof. Mogaga, I'm also in two positions here. The one is representing our Vice Chancellor, so warmest greetings from her, Professor Sibongile Mutu, our Vice Chancellor from the Nelson Mandela University. She has been here with the team last year, so some of you may have met her, and of course, working through some of the other collaborations that we are taking further. Last year, we rejuvenated or revitalized the Memorandum of Understanding that we had for a few years now. And today, again, we extend our collaboration in various ways and also to give effect to some aspects of that Memorandum of Understanding. Prof. Mugaga, I am really honored and humbled to be here with my colleagues, Jenny, Darrell, Joe, and Thabo, of course. And so my warmest greetings to the Vice Chancellor as well, Prof. Nawangwe. It's a pity that we couldn't get to each other, but of course, university executives are very busy. Warm greetings to yourself as the principal of the College for Education and External Studies. Also, Dr. Deva Onen, the Dean for East African School of Higher Education Studies and Development, Dr. Jude Simpebwa, Dr. Baloja, Dr. Kimoga, Dr. Itomaru, Dr. Mukwenda, and other colleagues from this highly esteemed institution on our continent. When we discussed our potential collaborations last year, of course, Darrell already started meeting with some staff members who are pursuing doctoral studies at Nelson Mandela University. So there already some makings of real collaborative work coming through as well. And a number of the colleagues, of course, also attended the colloquium last year. So in all objective estimations, one can say that this MOU is alive and well and growing. And very, very, thank you so much for that. And just say something about our university size and shape. We have 7 faculties across 7, faculties are not across 7 campuses, but the university is distributed across 7 different campuses. Our size and shape more or less almost the same as Makerere as well, with 32,000 students around there. And of course, almost the same number of staff as well. So in that sense, there's a good reason for us to work together. Our motto is to be an engaged, socially responsive university in service of society. That's our key tagline. And under that, of course, we have various projects running the revitalization of the humanities because we are strong in STEM subjects, engineering, and we have opened up a medical school as well. Ocean sciences, it's one of our key areas of focus as well. And then, of course, we also had some other key projects like the one that I'm driving with in the engagement and transformation portfolio. Those you can find, on our university website. And we are also aware that Makerere University has strong relationships with a number of other universities in South Africa and across different knowledge fields. And this visit of ours is part of that broader higher education friendship between our countries as well. So in a sense, representing more or less the sector to sector engagement between our two countries. We are also aware of the growth, and the principal spoke about that, the growth in public and private higher education. And later on, when I deliver the talk, I'll speak more about that, and especially in the East African community. And the number of institutions that have grown and that are affiliated to the Inter-University Council of East Africa, also similar to this African context where we also are experiencing a massive expansion of the system, which is tied, of course, to global processes as well. So we hope to build stronger ties and networks, on the higher education institution in the East African community. And of course, we hope that Makerere University, and especially the school, will assist us in building those networks, especially mobilizing your illustrious history in the higher education field, Jude and colleagues. So for our specific purposes, This will be the practical expression of that MOU, which we can report back into the principals of our university as well. And so we hope that as we move ahead with the day and, going into meetings after lunch, that we can firm up those discussions. So many, many thanks for your warmth and generosity. We certainly feel at home. Thank you so much.
Morning, everyone. Thank you so much, Joe, for that introduction. Just to mention, because Joe forgot to say it when he introduced himself, that he is a postdoctoral fellow at the chair, and it's wonderful to work with him. Thank you so much for having me. It's been really lovely so far. Kampala is amazing. I'm a big fan. And I'm just here today really to give you a bit of an overview of the chair for critical studies in higher education transformation, which we call CRISHET because it's shorter, and to sort of give you a sense of how that the establishment of the chair and the formulation of the chair's intellectual project has led to our interest in critical university studies, and particularly in how to advance that across the continent. So yes, this is the chair. Prof. Keet holds the chair, and I'm the program coordinator. So I kind of run things, as Joe said, in the background. It was established in 2018, so we're not that old yet. Wait, I just have to figure out which button makes this thing move. Excuse me. Yeah, it's not working. Which button do I use to move the slides? Yes. Oh, I'm in the wrong thing. Which one? Yes. That one. Okay. Ah, there we go. Okay. I'm more technically challenged than I thought. So the chair has a vision to be a premier national, regional, and international site for critical studies in higher education transformation. And for us, this means, one, driving the transformation agenda of the university, and to ground that very much in critical studies. So to bring a strong intellectual aspect to the process of transformation, specifically for Nelson Mandela University, but also more generally. And some of the things that we're interested in is the questions around the African purpose curriculum and the current debates around decolonization and the university, which came out very strongly in the South African discourse after the 2015-2016 Fees Must Fall protests. And as you'll see, we have various ways in which we approach this, basically programmatic and intellectual work. So this involves leading projects, leading programs, and I'll talk a bit more about some of those later on. Engaging with internal stakeholders, so across the faculties, and then also obviously with external stakeholders. So that is in our communities, across the continent, across the globe, etc. And then another very key area, and I think this is perhaps our strongest area at the moment, is contributing to knowledge production. So that's through production of scholarly outputs, being commissioning editors of book series, etc. And yeah, we also have a mentoring aspect. Mentoring, Prof. Keet doesn't like the term, but basically providing space for young people to grow in their academic careers from honors level to PhD level. And obviously then supervision falls into that. And we also work with funded projects as well. So when the chair emerged, there was obviously the work needed to be done on finding a kind of intellectual focus for the chair. And we still see ourselves in many ways as a cluster of different areas, and we work across disciplines. But the one that has emerged most strongly is the area of critical university studies. And Prof. Keet will talk more about this later on in his presentation. But just for now to say that this is really our key focus area. And then we bring other elements, social justice elements, disciplinary elements into that focus. I also like to note that we are also interested in other alternative or radical approaches to the study of the university, such as abolitionist university studies. And in that kind of area is where we see the ACUSAfrica network, that is the Advancing Critical University Studies Across the Africa network. So we have a number of other projects beyond the network, although we see them as places where the network's work can feed in and grow. So basically platforms that our collaborators can feed into. So the one is the online resource for higher education transformation. This is kind of gives you a sense of the aesthetic feel we're going for with the website. But basically this is intended to be an online platform where people can engage around the resources we already have about higher education transformation, because there are actually quite a lot of resources, but they're not necessarily speaking to each other. And also intended to be an interactive place. So there'll be forums, there'll be a blog space, and ultimately we want it to become a platform for training and development. So as the ACUSAfrica network grows and we engage with more institutions, there's potentially short courses, professionalization programs that could feed into that platform. I mentioned earlier that we like to try and provide space for students to really grow in their research capacities, in their academic citizenship. And we have a number of programmatic aspects that feed into that. The one currently that actually Dr. Joe is driving is the Student Navigational Capacities Research Project. And this is a student-driven project that has been conceptualized with students at honors and master's level. And the idea here is to look at students from quintile 1 to 3 schools. So these are schools that receive a lot of state support in South Africa, which means that the students who come from there are quite economically disadvantaged, but who still find ways to navigate through universities. And our interest here is to learn how these students navigate those spaces using the things that they bring from their communities, their society, their families. So the idea is to focus on the narrative aspect of that. So to hear the student stories and then examine what that might tell us and how that might inform our university's projects to humanize pedagogy, to decolonize, to develop African purpose curricula even. And tied to that, on the more programmatic side, is the reading group, which we hope to expand into a residence program. And the idea here is really just to get students together weekly to read material that they are interested in, especially around questions around the university, around social justice, around decolonization, Africanization, critical like study of gender, etc. And yeah, we revitalized that last year. It's run by students, and yeah, I think this year is going to be a great year for that. And the idea is here also to provide a space that where they can intellectualize the residences. So not just a place to live, but also a place to think, to discuss ideas, and like in a very open way. And then our programmatic work ranges from colloquia, seminars, book launches, etc. The South-South collaboration is really important for us. You can see some of the engagements we had last year from someone from Brazil and with our own scholars around the questions of decolonization. We also, as I mentioned, have a really strong publication output, which is driven by our network of Heavers and associates, Heavers being honorary visiting adjunct professors. And we also have a number of postdocs, Joe being one of them. And we also supervise across disciplines, both within our university and without. This is in collaboration with faculties. And you can see that our research outputs normally reach between 40 and 60 a year. Through the cohort that we have and through our own internal research. So we have a very strong research presence. We are also, what's the word, Andre? Andre is the commissioning editor, I believe, of these 2 book series. The one is African Higher Education, Developments and Perspectives. That's with Brill Publishers, so that's our northern publisher. And then we also have On Higher Education Transformation, which is published by African Sun Media. So that is our local publisher. So we hope that as the network grows, there'll be people who are interested in these areas and might put forward book proposals to these 2 series. We also have a Mandela University Press just kind of established that is also interested in these kind of areas and would be interested to receive proposals. So now that's sort of the chair, and this is, we imagine it as kind of the platform, at least from our side, of how, as to how to invest in and explore this network. And we hope that some of these areas and platforms that we have will be useful to the network as we go forward. Okay, so I hope this is going to work. It's basically just should give you an overview of the development of the ACUSAfrica network, and then I'll just wrap up afterwards and hand over to Keet. So yes, let's hope this is fine.
The ACUSAfrica network's origins are tied to the 2019 Emancipatory Imaginations Advancing Critical University Studies Winter School. This event, conceptualized by André Keet of Nelson Mandela University and Dina Beluigi of Queen's University Belfast, saw scholars from across the globe gathering for provocations, contestations, and disputations on the question of plural emancipatory imaginings for the university. One of the key pathway suggestions that emerged from the Winter School was the creation of platforms and opportunities for the co-creation of knowledge between students, academics, and communities. The first iteration of these imaginings is the ACUSAfrica network, led by André, Dina, and Michael Okierofo, and their collaborative teams of Nelson Mandela University, Queen's University Belfast, and the University of Ghana. The network's online presence was established in 2020, describing its website as a dialectical space to foreground scholarship for advancing critical university studies across Africa in dialogue with scholarship from across the global south and north, with the substance thereof as shaped organically by its contributors who are constituted from networks of scholars and practitioners across the world. The network further states that underpinning the work of the critical study of higher education is the endeavor to find other ways to study universities which are capable of thinking in plural forms of emancipatory higher education imaginations and futures. With the devastating onset of COVID-19, the network's first gathering was an online reflective discussion amongst members held on the 8th of July 2020. Titled The Implications of COVID-19 for CUS, the discussion was an important moment for the fledgling network and its members to regroup in the midst of a truly life-altering pandemic. 2020 also saw the first year of funding for André's Advancing Critical University Studies research project by South Africa's National Research Foundation. The funding, which is for the period 2020 to 2022, has been instrumental in supporting the network's online presence, the hosting of colloquia and various scholarly gatherings, and the overall development of the network and its various objectives. ACUSAfrica's first dedicated colloquium was held online in February 2021, with the title Critical University Studies and the Battle Against Global Racism. A number of speakers from the network, including Sharon Stein from the University of British Columbia and Christy van der Westhuizen from Nelson Mandela University, presented on their research and projects. Michael reflected on the position, role, and function of the network within a connecting web of ideas, and Aslam Fatah of Stellenbosch University spoke to the establishment of ACUSAfrica's South African chapter. The first keynote, Transforming African Universities and Epistemic Cultures in the Post-COVID-19 World, was delivered by Paul Zaleza of the United States International University, Africa. And the second, titled, If You Were a White Man, They Would Have Negotiated With You the Minute You Were Approached, Bodies of Value in Academic Life, by Shirley Ann Tate of the University of Alberta. The colloquium also introduced the ACUSAfrica webinar series. The first seminar in the series, titled Navigating Shomoy Escapes and Faculty Life in the Global South, was a panel discussion on the 17th of March 2021. A number of seminars have followed, including that of Sumi Koo of the National University of Ireland, Galway, on sustainability, transdisciplinarity, and the public epistemic role of higher education, held on the 7th of October 2021. And by Michelinos Zimbalas of the Open University of Cyprus on refusal as effective and pedagogical practice, held on the 19th of April 2022. Also in 2021, ACUSAfrica's podcast series was launched. The first episode, a paper by André titled Racism's Knowledge and University Transformation, originally presented in the Society for Research into Higher Education Southwest Network's webinar series. Other episodes include a paper by Kopano Ratele of Stellenbosch University titled The World as It Could Be, Africa's Psychology for the Inferiorized, and a presentation by Rilebogile Moletsane of the University of KwaZulu-Natal titled Rethinking Mandela's Legacy in the Midst of War on Women's Bodies, a Feminist Dance, a Ghost Dance. 2 book projects linked to the network are currently in various stages of production. The first of which, Advancing Critical University Studies, edited by André, Dina, and Jason Arday of Durham University, flows directly from the 2019 Winter School. Although the edited collection does not focus exclusively on the African University or the University in Africa, most of the chapter authors are members of the network. A second project had its first workshop presentation and discussion session in August this year. The title of the workshop and the proposed title of the book is The De- or Recompositional Grounds of the University in Techno-Rational Times, and the project and book is coordinated by Aslam, Andre, and Shireen Mutala of the University of Johannesburg. During the workshop, Sarah Musuetsa of the Human Science Research Council, Sarah Nuttall of the University of the Witwatersrand, Pramesh Lalu of the University of the Western Cape, and Michael Peters of Beijing Normal University participated in an open seminar on the project title. The 2022 colloquium, Self-Reflexive Solidarities in the Techno-Rational Times, represents a key moment in the history of the network. As the first official in-person gathering under ACUSAfrica's banner, it brings its established collaborators, such as the institutions Nelson Mandela University, Queen's University Belfast, University of Ghana, and the National Research Foundation, and scholars from across Africa and the globe, together, along with new collaborators such as the Human Science Research Council. We hope that the network will grow in years to come and that we can work towards renewed solidarities across our continent and beyond to advance the critical study of higher education.
But I hope it gave you at least a sense of the network and the work that we are trying to do. Just an extra note is that colloquium mentioned at the end of the presentation, the ACUSAfrica colloquium of 2022, was also where we met Prof. Jude and his colleagues who were able to come and visit the colloquium, and which really was the moment that gave birth to this particular meeting, and hopefully many more collaborations and explorations of the possibilities of a network in critical university studies across Africa. Thanks very much. I think I need to hand over to either Joe or Andre. Thanks.
Oh, yeah, thank you so much. And I don't know what to say, actually, in so many respects. Connecting with colleagues across our continent has always been a humbling experience in so many respects. And I'm going to try and present, and I hope you can just gather it from my demeanor, that in no way do I regard myself as an expert of anything. I would rather for us to afterwards have a conversation as to where we take this particular project. But I'll share with you the kinds of things that has kept my mind busy as I, of course, became more involved in the study of higher education. The screen is not sharing. Yeah, there it's going. Yeah. So the outline of my presentation is just going to quickly look at the growth of higher education in Africa, because I want to make the connection between the growth of the sector and the lag in relation to its study. That's the connection what I'm trying to make. And then I'm going to just share with you over the past 2 years, the Africa-focused themes that came through a thematic analysis of University World News, both the Africa edition and the global edition, over a period of 18 months. Then just look at the differences between higher education studies as conventionally understood, and then higher education transformation studies, which is a peculiar formulation of higher education studies in South Africa, and then of course critical university studies, and then some ideas around the ACUSAfrica and the pathways for discussions further. I do have some definitional parameters and thematics of what I would propose would be an area of study for critical university studies, but these matters need to emerge generatively, iteratively. And I think because contexts differ, the thematics for particular regions will also differ as we move along. But the key area would be, what would be different to this approach to the study of the university in relation to how universities have been studied traditionally? Now, the growth of higher education in Africa has been phenomenal over the past 50, 60 years, as you can see there, starting from a low base before 1944, with 31 degree granting institutions, to now 1,639. I think it's now 1,682 at the present moment, because these figures stopped at 2015. And this particular trend has been massive in relation growing at a staggering growth of 74.10% in comparison to other regions in the world. So now here already lies the trick around higher education studies. If you have such an explosion of a particular social institution emerging in society, you would require a formulation of studying it as a key area, because it shapes now the world in which we live and the countries in which we apply our trades as well. But of course, despite this growth of, we still lag far behind, comparatively speaking, on a global scale. This is the numbers in terms of millions, just the growth of student enrollments on our continent, which have grown from 0.74 to 12.2 million, and even higher, as you will see from the next slide as well. So there's a massive expansion of higher education on the continent. And scholars in this school, School for Study of Higher Education and Development at Makerere University and others here, would be well versed in this, because we are all interested in these developments. I'm just sharing it so that I can make the connection between the emergence of critical university studies. So in the 2018 figures for the number of universities has been 1,682 on the African continent. Zeleza refers to this particular explosive growth, but the share in relation to higher education institutions remain low at 8.9 in relation to the global number of higher education institutions, compared to, say, for instance, Asia, Europe, North America, and even lower than Latin and America and the Caribbean as well. And the numbers of students, of course, has also increased from the 12 million that I've mentioned earlier to 14.6 in 2017. In the South African sector, that particular expansion is highly palpable. But when it comes to higher education studies in Africa, there has been a slow expansion of the field. This particular school, with its scholarly work and the Journal of Higher Education, Makerere Journal of Higher Education, is some of the few that you will find that is dedicated to the study of universities as social institutions on the continent. So we do not have many centers, institutes, and schools. So there's a particular attraction, to this school, and of course to the university, in the way in which we would like to see the networks emerge, with regard to higher education studies broadly, but also critical university studies in particular. There's even less studies of critical studies on the philosophy, role and purpose and programmatic work of the universities. We are still grappling today on our continent with the question of, what is an African university, and what is Africanization within our university. Yet the themes on the complexities of higher education in research and other writings are remarkable. The complexities of the system is mind-boggling, meaning that there is a gap between the complexities that the system needs to respond to within itself, internally and externally, and the formations of study fields that needs to guide the system with regard to scholarly work as to how to respond to those challenges. The Africa Focus Studies on University World News covers a total set of articles for 2020 of 398, of course, 264 for the Africa edition and 68 for the global edition, and 196 because we've only done it up till 2021. The study still continues, and so it will conclude with 2021 and then move into 22 as well. So out of these numbers of articles published within Africa or within University World News, which is close, I think more than 500, the top most prevalent themes, and this is what one would regard as evidence-based, driving of one's work. The 10 most prevalent themes is teaching and learning. The second one, student and student unions. Of course, the idea that the student is central to the university comes through. Then the need for universities across different sectors and across different regions to collaborate, like the work that we are doing now today as two universities. The question of staff that was earlier raised by the CEO of the school, of the college. Those matters also come through very strongly. Student and staff well-being comes through strongly. And then, of course, the question of equality, inequalities, and equity at number 5. Now, there already, the indications of why critical university studies would become important emerges simply, in terms of an analysis of what people are interested in or people think universities should focus on. Research at number 6, university operations at number 7, facilities at number 8, and then crucially management and leadership number 9, and then the broader transformation of higher education. And remember, we had more than 100 themes coming through. Transformation in both years features in the top 10. The internal transformation of the university alongside social justice imperatives features in both areas and both years, of course. And here, of course, you can see that students has now overtaken the into teaching and learning as the number 1 concern for researchers and people commenting on the sector. Teaching and learning shifted to number 3, but the relationships with government and the relationship with the public sector then came in at number 2. Funding, income, investment, a big concern for our universities. Equality, inequalities, equity has just shifted to number 10, and transformation, of course, remains at inequalities, equity, inequalities, and equalities shifted to number 6, and transformation remained at number 10 as well. Whilst you can see that the concern for employees and employee unions remain also within the top 10 of the research. Now, if one has to be honest about how one reconfigure a research program within the confines of higher education studies or critical university studies, one has to look at what the evidence shows with regard to the interest in research themes that emerge. And of course, if one doesn't do that, you may be at a distance of what the sector really requires researchers and scholars to do. The key concept, of course, with regard to teaching and learning, my apologies, are reflected here. And I'm not going to go to all of those because I think that I need to just try and manage some of the time that we've lost. I'm going to screen them here. That's the one on students and student unions. So this research not only identifies the major macro theme, but it also gives you the themes that constitute the macro themes so that scholars within higher education can have a sense of what are the concerns being raised, on not only researchers, but also general observers on higher education as well. So collaborative efforts, then employee and employee unions, inequities, inequalities, the question of social discrimination, marginalized and disadvantaged group, across the sector, whether it's socioeconomic or otherwise. And then the question of underserved populations, flexibility, equitability, connectivity around inclusivity, as you can see relating to the pandemic and the emergency online movement of teaching and learning as well. Then research, again, Jude and colleagues So the thematics that are coming through is that there is a bigger need for Africa-related research. Okay, now here, it is not as if we do not have research on the continent and on the sector, but rather what assumptions drive those research, which makes the resolutions and findings of the research more or less image the conventional university, the university as it is, or the university as we come to know it. And that particular university is taking over our imagination. So we can't think the university differently. You know, there's a set of images in our head about what the university should do, which disallows an emancipatory imagination of what the university could achieve if we think it differently. I'll talk about those later on when I come to critical university studies. Then university operations, facilities, management, and leadership. And then here, of course, the massive area of transformation that came through that thematic analysis as well, that covers both, the 2021 and the 6 months of 2020 and the 6 months of 2021. And you can see the expansion of the thematic themes that scholars are interested in this field. And then, of course, the question of government coming through as well. And then a major concern around funding, income, and investment. Now, part of our task as critical scholars of the university is to have thoughtful critique of the university, but critique in such a way that drives different forms of sustainability for the university. Because you would not like to critique the university at the edge of its own implosion, because otherwise you're not going to serve your society. But you would like to have radical transformation of the university to better, pursue the imperatives of, say, for instance, development in different contexts. Then again, the question of funding and income as well. And as we may well know, and this is part of the battle that CUS will need to fight across the continent, is the per capita expenditure on higher education, which is very, very low compared to other countries as well. So that's one of the big areas that we can tackle already. If you look at research being done globally now on higher education diversity and equity between 2016 and 2021, you can see 4 clusters emerging. And this is also a thematic keyword analysis of 2,562 articles published over the past 5 years on higher education, drawn from the 4 core databases of the Web of Science. On the right-hand side, is it the same? No, that will be the left-hand side. On the left-hand side, you will see the emergence, and the green also shows the types of research that came in later, in the past 5 years. You can see the emergence around the question of e-learning, digital transformation, distance education, technology, and teaching and learning, which predominates, the debate at the present moment on the university and how the university is going to rethink itself in the post-COVID era as well. At the top, you will find the question of globalization, internationalization, policy, the performance of the university, governance and management, innovation. That's more or less like the standard regime of interest that people have within research. And then the cluster in the middle, when we speak about transformation, of course, it links it specifically to curriculation. But even as the research identify this as a strong area of interest for scholars, having knowledge formations and curricular changes within university across the globe, and not only on our continent, has been very, very limited. Very difficult, very limited as well, because we are framed within certain kinds of knowledge traditions that disallow these new forms coming through as well. In the red and the blue that becomes the purple, you can see on the outer skirts here, the outside of this particular diagram, The research areas of diversity, equity, inclusion, social justice, race, gender, women, access, decolonization, language, power, culture coming through as well. What is the big takeaway from this slide? The big takeaway from this slide is that as universities become obsessed with digital transformation, it doesn't link digital transformation to social justice transformation. For scholars, and that's why the green part and the purple part on the side are so diverse from one another. If there was a link, this particular cluster and that cluster would have been closer together. But they're separated by a sea of research that divides them. So there is very little research that think about the deployment of technologies, e-learning, and the digital in relation to the advancement of a more equitable institution or the advancement of a more equitable distribution across institutions or national systems or global systems. Now, at the time when universities shifted in this particular direction, many of us have more or less indicated that this will be a new form of inequality that will not only, deepen existing inequalities, but literally create new inequalities within higher education. And though there are scholars that try to combine these two areas of work with one another under the broader umbrella of transformation, the research shows that that connection is almost non-existent. And so if I would think around the question of techno-rationality and the question of digital transformation of higher education, then one of the big tasks of critical university studies would be to deconstruct those assumptions that comes with digital transformation so that one can invest into technology, the key purpose of driving equality within our sector. That will be a key area of work that needs to emerge. The comparison, of course, between the dispositions of higher education studies and higher education transformation studies and critical university studies out of the research that we've been doing under the NRF project is both methodological, epistemological, and ontological. And under critical university studies, the question that we are seized with is what specific imagination or how does a specific imagination of the university impose on transformative knowledge? How is knowledge not only imprisoned, but disciplined to keep the university function in the way that it does? How is knowledge disciplined to play a reproductive role instead of a transformative role? And how does ideology and power shape the very idea of the university? How does the university emerge in the public consciousness as a social institution? And you can see how the difference between the three areas or subfields of study and on the study of the university then sets critical university studies apart. And with critical, we are not only going to study the idea of critiquing the university, but the idea of critiquing with the purpose of finding alternative ways of thinking praxis within the university. And that, of course, has to take into consideration that within established institutions like universities, there are also very productive and good and brilliant practices. Né? And how do one build on those existing practices to advance the university as a public good? So the divergent traditions is even evident within critical university studies. And so that's why we're thinking about more an Africa-focused university studies to emerge, because we would not want to be framed by critical university studies, in its totality as how it emerged in the Anglo-Saxon context, okay? So, sorry, Anglo-American context. And so we try to do that particular kind of work, by looking at more radical approaches to the study of the university, like abolitionist university studies, and of course, providing a more radical edge to the idea of the critical. There are a couple of thematics that emerge from critical university studies that may be instructive for how we think the future research programs that we may want to embark upon. Here it's going now. And sorry for this, I couldn't get this to be a bit bigger this morning when I tried to drop this in here. The one will be the privatization and the new liberalization of the university globally, of course, and the ties between the new liberal project and the universities. Not only how we are invested and implicated in that particular project, but also how we can unburden ourselves from that particular project. Then labor and the university, it comes up as a very key question earlier as well, with the opening remarks, and how labor within the university becomes a contested terrain, not only for staff, but also for students. What we will call the capitalization of academic labor. And then pedagogy and the university, and not only in relation to the labor relations within the university, but the for-profit drive that comes with the privatization or the corporatization of the universities, that of course influences the sets of pedagogies, because the pedagogies has to play in to the structure of what the university would like to achieve from a profit basis. The funding of the university will become a key area as well, and the funding across national systems. The globalization of the higher education sector in general, and how we have to play into the question, Jude, that you also raised this morning, of ratings and rankings, and sometimes lose out on the key area of work that we need to pursue. The question of study and work articulation, and the last one that was also a part of thinking around critical university studies, is knowledge and critique, as to what new forms of knowledge will be most suitable for providing a productive critique of the university. And here, I always try to say this, critique is an act of fidelity. Okay? So critique is not a dismissal. Critique is a better embrace of the university. So when you critique the university as a social institution, you are not dismissing the university. You are investing your energies in making the university better, according to a set of normative principles that resides within what we all would like to achieve as humanity. Okay, so critique is an act of fidelity. So the idea of CUS is an approach to the study of the university that critically explores the taken for granted assumptions of higher education. Now, I've got a broader definitional set of parameters here, but I was telling Jenny, I'm not sure whether I should share it, because part of it is for us to come up with a discussion around this. But we have to, the taken for granted assumptions of the university, like for instance, the link between the university and industry, or the link between the university and the world of work. Those are all taken for granted assumptions about the university that requires to be questioned. Right? What are these assumptions? What do they mean? What does it say about ourselves as university? What does it say about ourselves as academics as well? And in that space, of course, all those taken for granted assumptions will lead to forms of self-clarification as well. One can call it receivable categories. We receive these categories, and because these categories are so ingrained in the way in which we see the university, we can't imagine the transformative potential of the institution or the radical way in which the institution can change. On our continent, we actually had a few examples of universities that have been, grown from the ground to provide for an alternative idea of what the university may mean, but they were not very successful. And we have to think about what lessons we draw from that as well. In fact, Daniel Abudere has also tried some work, I think here in Uganda, isn't it? Is Daniel Abudere from Uganda? Yeah, in Uganda on that work as well, alternative forms of university education and how to think the university. So coming back then to the practical side of things, and Jenny spoke to this earlier, we have been amazingly heartened by the colleagues from Makerere University last year. You know, when we had funding, of course, to have meetings for 3 years, and I've put in another proposal now as well. And in the middle 2 years, we actually had it all in 2020. We had everything planned. The invitations were already on its way out and so on. And then COVID hit, of course. So we would have had a second meeting. The November one of last year would have been the second meeting of the emerging ACUSAfrica network, because the funding in terms of its second objective was requested, you know, to invest in building the network as well. And it's almost like a, you know, what one can say, written in the stars, you know, in having the Makerere team there in November 2022, that just provided us with these massive opportunities now to start, you know, strengthening the network within the East Africa context, you know, and I know that there's an interest from the school in being the hub of those activities. Those are discussions within the university that needs to ensue, but we are very excited and, of course, you know, also humbled by reaching out in the ways that you did, Jude, you and your colleagues as well. And so working and co-traveling this journey together to find these other ways of studying the university, getting our PhDs and our master's students also to think through the university from the angle of power, authority, and privilege, you know, making the university internally a more just space so that it becomes a more socially engaged and responsive university in relation to the society in whose name it exists. So because we do exist in the name of societies that supports our work, or state of actors that does that as well. And so we have a growing online presence. The resource library is moving ahead. We already have spoken today that we will probably have to up our game now with the growth that we are envisioning now, with, you know, as far as our website is concerned. And these last few, just a few photos and images of how we, over the years, you know, this was the first meeting, and the next slide is the right. It's not coming. That's it, you see. So you see how it's growing already, you know? And so by the time that we meet in Ghana, you know, in the second part of this year, you know, this photo will probably be much bigger number of colleagues in there. This is the kind of work that we do within the network that Jenny also referred to. And this is just some images of the 2022 one. Also the one on the de- and recompositional grounds of the university in techno-rational times. The key question here was a very interesting observation that as we engage with our learning and teaching and our research and engagement within the university, there's already a form of techno-rationality shaping the university almost invisibly, you know. And so by the time that you open your eyes, the university has converted into a techno-rational machine. And of course, some of these things will be good and productive, but some of them will have unintentional consequences that a study like critical university studies needs to disclose, okay? And so the pathways for the network, this is the work of solidarity and love. I have no problem in using the word love, right? This is the work of love, okay? This work has to do with how we build friendships, how we connect with one another, how we're getting to understand one another better, how we invite each other into our spaces, how we share our thoughts, deep solidarities across borders. Right? And of course, it's through that kind of work that the collaborative funding proposals and the teaching, research, and programmatic work will come through. The book project is already a great platform, so is ORED for the work of the network. And the network must take a truly African flavor. It must have a Southern attitude to it, okay, in all aspects, whether it's Southern epistemologies, Southern styles, and Southern languages. It must have that particular feel to it. So, and we have to think then about, the growth of regions, in regions on the continent. One of the things that one has to envisage is because we have so many differences amongst one another, amidst the things that brings us together, that there will be contextual factors that will come into play in different regions, different institutions, and keeping the network flexible, mobile, and agile will be one of the things that we will have to think about. When we speak about epistemic freedom and epistemic justice, we shouldn't ourselves become dogmatic about our own work, okay? But keep an open epistemic frame as to the knowledges that we are encountering. So it's going to be great work, and see how the school can guide us in this work. Currently, the Secretariat from last month is hosted at the University of Ghana. So they will be managing the 2023 colloquium, and all communications will via that particular Secretariat. We'll make those connections as well. I'll see, depending on how our discussion goes here, whether when we visit Ghana for a programmatic discussion in a month or so, whether colleagues from this part of our continent can also join us in that particular discussion as well. The dates will be sorted out soon, so that we can have a meeting on planning the 2023 colloquium well in advance, because we have to send out the concept note as well. So colleagues, thank you so much for listening to me. There you have it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Prof. Keet. I suppose that was a ride that many of us will remember for a very long time. An opportunity to step out of the shadows of the North. At the end when you talked about that, I was like, yeah, this is an opportunity for us to have, a study of universities that is not overshadowed by, northern approaches. So, and to think about what we have in terms of power, authority, and privilege. I find that a very interesting frame of analysis, of understanding the kinds of spaces we're dealing with. Thank you very much, Prof. Keet, and I invite you to, again, give him some love. He loves the word love. In the absence of Dr. Baloja, who was to take us through the question and answer session, I will, with permission from Jude, I am going to conduct that session. So this is the space I'm sure many of us have been waiting for. Those who came with questions already, those who came with reason to want to clarify certain things, and those who have new questions after listening to Prof. Keet and to any of the other speakers that was here earlier. So this is the opportunity to put your question forward, or if you have a point of discussion or an intriguing insight that you'd like to share in this space. You're welcome. Yes, Dr. Mukwenda. There's a roving mic. Then you can come here. Oh, okay.
Thank you, the MC or the director for this function. I would like to take this moment to thank the presenter. And I have an insight. It is a wonderful thing that we are meeting here today as people who are interested in matters of higher education. Africans have been somehow looked at in a negative way, to an extent that people say Africans are only deep believers and they are not serious thinkers. That Africans are great believers, but they are not serious thinkers. Now that we have a moment that we can talk of critical university studies, I feel very much, I have great joy that we can sit together and discuss that. Because for moments or for decades, we have been looked at as people who cannot think seriously, but who can just believe, meaning you can just follow. So it is really very interesting that we are here as scholars, we are here as academics, discussing critically about issues that go on in higher education. We have also been reduced to issues like you import everything, including importing names. Why don't you make your own names? You are named after the Europeans, you are named after the white saints. Are you running short of names? Do you lack even that technique of naming your own people? So you are borrowing even names, you are importing even names from abroad. And so for me, I'm the happiest person that we are here in Makerere trying to discuss critically issues that affect our higher education institutions. Now, you have, Professor Keet, as you have ably discussed what it means to be a critical university. That is not about just critiquing the university, but you should go a step to critique with the university. But I'm also adding that there are 3 elements to it. You can have a critique on the university or about university activities. You can have a critique with the university, but the university should grow. So there can be a critique by the university. So that now you are enabling it, you are empowering it to be able to do things very rightly. But in the interest of time, that was all I had to share. The next things we shall handle when we are meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mukwenda. A critique of, a critique with, and a critique by the university. Wow. Thank you very much. I suppose Prof will speak into that also, but we can take a few more comments or questions. Yes, please take the space.
Thank you so much. I have a burning concern as a scholar, emerging scholar, and with interest in this particular area. And I spotted a network. How do I become part of the network? Because that can significantly contribute to my growth and development, and perhaps also disseminating what I have to the rest, as I also benefit from what others are doing and what they have done. So how does one become a member of the network?
Thank you. That will be addressed. And as you still have the mic, please would you share your name and your affiliation?
My name is Gloria Lamaro. I'm a PhD student in the East African School of Higher Education Studies and Development, and also providing my service as a teaching staff in Gulu University.
Awesome.
So even as my first question was dealing with an individual becoming a member of a network, how can I also position my university where I serve to become part of the network so that it doesn't stop in Makerere, but we can broaden it up so that Gulu University is also brought on the platform. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you. That will definitely be addressed.
Good afternoon, colleagues. My name is Omala Edward, and I'm a teacher in the philosophy department. I thank the presenter and all others, including those who invited us to this meeting. I think it is very eye-opening to hear about this kind of development. Some of us were not aware of it. My question is, the focus is on universities, but according to recent scholarship, you will note that universities are no longer operating in vitro. We are having what is known as a triple helix, where universities are working with or in conjunction with industry and states. Each of these has their own agendas. States, for example, are very patronizing, and they will want universities, in some cases, to teach certain issues and to discard other issues. Industry, for its part, would want universities to undertake research, develop curricula that will lead to marketable programs, marketable courses, so that they link with the market. Now, as you talk about universities doing this critical thing, thinking critically, why are you leaving all these other actors in the helix? What if university thinking, internal thinking, is not in sync with what the state thinks or industry for that matter? I'll give you an example. I come from the philosophy department. Supposing we wanted to deepen skills of critical thinking as one of the programs we teach in the Department of Philosophy, somebody in industry might wonder, you are teaching students critical thinking. How does that add to our market? Now, in that kind of situation, what are we going to do? Respond to the market needs or deepen what we think will improve critical thought? We have this kind of dilemma where we're standing in more or less crossroads. We are pulling different directions. As we emphasize universities, think about critical studies, how do we relate to the other issues of market, patronage from the state, and those other concerns? I submit.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I think we could have one more and then response, then we pick up a few more afterwards.
Yes, thank you very much. Professor Keet, thank you for your presentation. Our dear guests, you're all welcome. And the organizers, we are really grateful for having been invited here. My name is Robin Nakavo. I am working at the Uganda Matters University as the acting director for the School of Postgraduate Studies and Research. This is a critical discussion indeed, but I would like to look at it especially from the angle of women joining higher education. There has been a move towards promoting literacy levels among girls and women. And indeed, universal primary education, universal secondary education are underway to push women through those levels. Now, when they join higher education, I think there is a tendency for them to drop off, probably after the first degrees or something. We see very few advancing past the undergraduate degrees. And I'm just wondering, where is the space for advancing women in higher education, not only in education, but also in its management and leadership? And secondly, the other concern is about publication that emerges from universities. How do we ensure that we don't lose our voice as Africans? Because many of the publications that go to international journals have to be expensive but not accessible. And our own journals are sometimes considered to be not credible enough. So I don't know whether you also have space for publication outlets that is targeting Africans and probably women. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Robina. So I'll invite Prof. Keet to respond to those for the first round.
Yeah, we should have sat around like in a round circle, you know, and just chat away, you know. It's fantastic. And of course, it throws up more questions, and I think that's actually what the university is all about, is asking the right questions as well. And sometimes asking the right question is a practice in itself, because having to ask the right question, comes with forms of thinking to get to that particular point. So I am not going to presume that I will have big answers for this, but I'll be in the conversation, okay, with us. The one is the critique, within the university, beyond the university, and against the university as well, which I think is a key organizing principle of critical university studies. But we differentiate ourselves with the prefix of productive critique, né? Critique that seeks alternatives. Okay, so that's the key thinking around critical university studies, because so much of our scholarship has these sweeping critiques of the university without any answers. Right? The university is liberal, is new liberal that, the university is constraining this, the university is not doing that. True, one has to critique the university, but one has to let the mind move in the direction of alternatives. And they are there. They are there. Then, of course, Gloria, so thanks for that, Eleni. So Gloria, the great question, of course, and so nice to hear about an emerging scholar here in our midst. One of my other colleagues would have engaged with you very interestingly on the notion of emerging scholar. Eh? And so you said the University Gulu, né? Oh, so Professor Odora Hoppers is there as well, isn't it? Odora Hoppers, Catherine Odora Hoppers? Yeah, yeah, she's a good friend. Yeah, so you must send her my regards if you see her, please. And then the question is very easy. I think we have a website where you can link up as a member, and you will be a member. It's open, or you can just hang on for a little while whilst Jude and the colleagues, configures the East African Hub. So you can do both. So we'll provide you with the website on that, and there's great resources for your study that you can enter there. When that other website becomes live as well, comes on live, it will also have some great resources on studying the university. Okay, so we would like to have that resource available for free for everybody. Is it Edward from philosophy? No? Edward, yeah, okay. Around the triple helix. Now, Edward, you put philosophically, of course, one of the big questions back on the table here, and that is sometimes people talk about 5 helixes and even sometimes 6 now, but traditionally the 3 helix of, the state, the university, and of course society, and of industry part of that particular society. So this is one of the key challenges that critical university studies will have to grapple with. The one is, how does an approach to the study of the university protects the expansion of the human imagination, as you may well know, is a key function of philosophy as well, and of course advancing human capabilities, and through that set up a more critical, less instrumental relationship with the state and with industry. Now, of course, the university must have a link with industry, but the critique that comes from is the type of relationship that have emerged over the past 20 years. And that is an instrumental relationship, that the university is almost seen as a functionary of industry. Our studies should disallow that. We should pursue our articulation with industry, but from a critical perspective that doesn't make the correlation a correlation of a function that serves industry directly, of course. But the university has to provide for skills and forms of thinking that can articulate with industry, because we also have to work around the notion of employability of our graduates as well. So key question on the table there. With regard to the state, there again, for critical university studies, we have to advance the idea of the autonomy of the university, even if it's state funded, and even if it's funded by whoever, the autonomy of the university is sacrosanct, because the autonomy of the university is actually the principle that will serve the state better. Because if you leave the university to do what they do best, it will eventually serve the development imperatives that the state is interested in. But if you try to constrain the universities through state apparatuses, you will probably lose out as a state. So critical university studies have to think about how does it put forward, especially within regimes that seems to overstep the function of the states into the university. How do one engage, with the notion of autonomy, and then reassert that, of course, because we are all, we sign up to various kinds of associations that protects those governing principles around how the university should function. So that is not an answer, Edward, but I think it's a key interest that critical university studies should pursue. Then the Rabina now, of course, I can't see her now. She's just outside. Okay. Maybe I should go to the last question and see if she's back with regard to this. But both of them are hers. Do you want me to respond to it now, or do you think I should wait for that? Okay. Okay.
I have also been alerted to the time running out, but there was one question that one person had put up their hand. Maybe they could ask, and you respond to that as we see if we can get Robina back. And as yes, the one question, it was you, right? There's a hand here. Oh, okay. Okay, so we take the two then.
Okay, thank you, the moderator. My name is Gerard from the East African School of Education and Development Studies. So I'm a PhD student, and my research area is about graduate employability. So I want to look at what our principal talked about and what you elaborated. There is a big concern about graduates not meeting the required skills in the employment sector. And this one has been researched about by many scholars so far. And now we come to the question, what must universities do to train graduates who are employable, who will meet the requirements in the job market? Because apparently, when you look at Africa in general, there is a big problem of unemployment. And as we are going forward, there is going to be more unemployment because there is artificial intelligence, there is automated machines now. So what must universities do to pay attention to the employment of the graduates when they graduate? Like Professor Mgaga said, we are having so many coming in universities. And of course, the biggest percentage of us, we assume when I finish my studies, I should be employed. But apparently there is a problem. So how do we solve that problem? Through this critical thinking of the universities so that we can pay attention to these people who come to universities and how they can get out and be useful to the society. Thank you.
Thank you, Gerard. Last question.
Thank you very much. John Impande is my name. I'm part of the School of Business and Management with the Ghana Management Institute. Thank you, Professor, for the discussion. And one of the key areas that tickled my mind and contextualized the discussion was the variance or the diversity between the colorful illustration you had. On the purple side, we had equity, we had digitalization on the green side. So in my mind, I asked myself, as we seek to make the universities relevant, have we taken stock of the individual digital transformation in society? We are being forced to adopt digital transformation. I think COVID helped enhance that. But you realize that the relevance of our digital transformation, like Professor mentioned, the universities are moving faster than the society around them. So if we are thinking of critical, trying to contribute relevance to the university or the ecosystem of the university within which it lies, have we taken that, have we thought about how is this, and the digital transformation is dynamic. The society we want to target today won't be the same society in 2 years' time. How do we keep up with the ever-changing society and thus our ever-changing demand to be relevant in the ecosystem? Thank you very much. I submit.
Thank you, John. Prof, you're welcome to respond to the 3 questions. Oh, do we have a last one? Okay.
Thank you very much, presenter for today. I'm Joanna Timango. The rest I'll let you know later. Today, actually, I'm very consoled to be part of this team because the arrangement comes right from the College of Education. That is very consoling for me because for decades, I think the last 2 decades and especially the last decade, Uganda has been struggling a lot with things to do with sciences. And when they talk of arts, the most affected group is the College of Education, if I may say. And in that regard, you find that here, most of the research in other colleges are funded. For example, agriculture, social sciences, to mention but a few. When you come to the College of Education, there's almost least funding. And now when we talk of critical thinking or critical higher education, I'm looking at the aspect of funding. That is a very big challenge. And if our university is moving towards research-based, becoming research-based, we are already seeing that the college that may suffer most will be College of Education. And yet, as we talk of critical universities, that's where the brain work is. How are we going to make it clear to people who have been already biased that university must be science-based or else students must be science-based in order for them to be funded? How are we going to help those who are not really science-based? Thank you very much.
Oh, lovely. Thank you so much. Rubina, so I'm going to come back to your questions now. Been waiting for you. The one on women and higher education, which is it's been we have had now a couple of reports in our country on women, and then of course on Black women in higher education. There is I'm not sure whether that's the case in Uganda, but at the primary and secondary school level, the gender gap has more or less been close, both in terms of access and achievement. In fact, the females are outperforming males at those levels. At the university level, of course, it becomes a different story. Though you may have some of the projections of those into the undergraduate studies, but when it comes into the professoriate and other spaces, it becomes a bit more difficult for women, and especially for Black women. Our university actually has three Black females at our top leadership: Chancellor, Vice Chancellor, and our Chairperson of Council. They're both, all three of them are Black females. So the question would then be, critical university studies, because it's fairly clear that if those access matters and equity matters seems to be dealt with at the lower levels, it can only be a form of power and authority that functions as something that displaces the career trajectories of women. And that's precisely the task of critical university studies, is to disclose that. Right? Interestingly enough, the political construction of the professor has not been studied. How does a professor emerge within a setting as a political construct? The different sets of connections that are required and the different sets of imbalances that the person is privileged to, of course, on the positive side. So that political construction has not been done. I would not think that at the kind of micro level, one may want to study the career tracks of the female professoriate in the university to see where that go. When it comes to leadership positions, I think we only, out of the 26 universities, we only have 6 female vice chancellors. No, 6. So our figures there at the national level is still bad, because in terms of our own targets, we should have 13 female vice chancellors and 13 male vice chancellors. Okay, but we are not there yet. So those are challenges that you put forward there. Then the question of publications, of course, we will have to, through these networks, work with publications that move towards open access as well, but also that meets the requirements of scholarly publishing in terms of rigor. Okay, rigor, of course. Now, rigor is also a particular construct that has been imported. So one has to even decolonize rigor as well, without throwing away the idea of quality. Okay. But there are certain processes within the context of scholarly publications and rigor that will allow us to be on par as far as the quality of scholarly publication is concerned. Both these two series that we have here, they go through rigorous scholarly review processes, and they meet the requirements of both our national department, but also international standards as well. Okay, so we'll see how we can open up. In fact, it will be great for us because one series actually grows a bit slower than the other, so we will have to opt, and this network will provide us with more opportunities for that. I think it's Gerard on graduate employability. Of course, a global problem, a global challenge, and I suspect that Makerere has its own analytics and data that says, from what knowledge fields employability emerge and where it struggles more and so on. But then there's this particular, what do we call it? And it's not an assumption. It's something that floats in people's heads, that the humanities, produce less employable candidates than other knowledge fields. Right? But strangely enough, if you look at the real data, the employability of the humanities students doesn't lag far behind those in the STEM subjects. I think in South Africa is above 65%. Right? So I'm not so sure what it is in the case of Uganda. So you will have to engage with your contextual factors and see how that plays itself out as well. The industry requirements with regard to what universities should teach should have broad parameters that's flexible, but it can't be instructed, because the university can facilitate the conditions for employability, but it's not the university's task to develop a ready-made person that walks into a job and can do the job 100% the time that the student leaves the university. That is the task of industry themselves for those first 6 months. The university should simply allow for those key skills for students to be able to transition into that space with a broad set of skills that can make them better become contextualized within the work environment that they enter. The reason for that is because, as people always say, we talk here and then new types of job gets created. You don't have qualifications that respond directly to those kinds of things. Takako and her colleagues dealing with the question of a bachelor's in entrepreneurship, which is a particular kind of skill that can assist students to convert their own learnings and teaching into matrices of employability. Okay, so there are options for that, but I would like the question that was asked earlier from the philosophy professor, I would caution against the thinking in any space that the university is responsible to make a direct correlation with particular job categories. Okay, certain instances that may be true, but it will not be in all instances. Then is it Joe from business? Yeah, thank you so much for that. I got it right. So the question of you see though that slide of, yeah, it was also surprising to me because I've always thought in the general parlance of university speak that the question of equity and diversity relating to digital transformation seems to be like rooted. You know, I thought, you know, if we go into the digital transformation space, these kinds of things will be taken up, but that's not what the research is showing. Yeah? So part of critical university studies task is actually to disclose to ourselves what it is that we're actually doing. Because sometimes we say we're doing A, but we are actually producing Z. Eh? Because academics in general have a, I would say, probably a, not inflated, I would say that they have a moral sense of themselves and what they do in, yeah, at a distance from what they actually do. Okay, so we have to disclose to ourselves what it is that we are actually producing, eh? And this is the kind of analysis that, so you can show to scholars, yeah, you've been talking about digital transformation that will drive social justice, but look at what it's doing, you know what I'm saying? So that's the disclosing function of critical university studies. In fact, Ngugi wa Thiong'o, one of his definitions of decolonization is for us to see ourselves clearly. Eh? Simple definition of decolonization, the ability to see yourself clearly. I don't think the academy has that particular skill, you know, in abundance. I'm not casting a wide net here, but that sense of self-clarification of what is it that we're actually doing, we do not have. So you have a very, very interesting question as to how one can rejig the developments that are happening in the digital transformation space. And then Joanna, this is now a tough question, because the universities at the level of budgetary principles can make these budget principles independent of what is demanded from other agencies. So it's a battle within the university that one has to tackle with regard to how rewards and support and budgets are allocated for different knowledge fields. What do we call that in South Africa? But we have also this different sets of knowledge fields. You get more money if you study engineering, subsidy, you know, all those subsidies and all those things. But at our university, SESM categories, yeah. So at our university, the Vice Chancellor has just in the inaugural established the importance of the revitalization of the humanities, because we're actually very strong in sciences and in engineering. Vice Chancellor says, because we're strong in that, we can focus on budgetary support for the humanities. So that can be a university decision at that level. But at the same level, one has to battle the inequities that comes with the SESM categories. Why is it that different knowledge fields will have more funds attached to them from a subsidy perspective than other knowledge fields. Of course, I suppose that's the other assumption that we have within the sector. We think that we will teach and learn our way out of our problems through STEM. And it's actually STEM that has created the problems for us in the first instance. No? But that's one of the assumptions that we have. That's why we put so much money into STEM. Okay. But chemistry is not going to tell you that they're responsible for the problem of plastics in the world. You know, so they're not going to say that to you. Neither will all the other technologies that have produced actually the climate changes that we are now fighting against. So there as well is a disclosing critique that needs to happen. What is it actually that the sciences does that makes them like special in terms of funding allocations? And at the time now, when we are sitting with planetary challenges, we run to the idea of a collective humanity to save us from the problems that have been created by science. Okay. Long and short of this particular story, if you don't build a strong humanities and a strong education faculty, which I cluster under humanities, a strong law faculty, strong economic sciences faculty, you're going to run into trouble if you think that a focus on STEM subjects is going to create the type of student or the type of university that will serve the purposes of an African humanity. Right, colleagues, I think that's I'm done now, isn't it? Thank you so much for that.
Thank you very much, Prof. Keet. And with the one key point that I picked up, that we are in the business of revealing to ourselves what we are doing at the university. Please give him some love.